Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Kyle Clifford. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Kyle Marcus Clifford was born on April 5, 1998, and lived in Enfield, England. This is 1 hour north of London. In 2019, he joined the military, but dropped out just over 2 years later. For 5 months, he worked for a company that installed security systems and fire alarms. After that, he found a job at a catering company in their Future Leaders program. Considering how he was ultimately fired from that job, perhaps he was a better fit for the Future Jobless program. In January 2023, Kyle became romantically involved with a woman named Louise Hunt after meeting her on the dating site Bumble. Louise lived in Bushey, which is 1 hour northwest of London. She resided in a house with her father John, her mother Carol, and her older sisters Hannah and Amy. John Hunt was a racing commentator who worked for BBC Radio 5 Live and Sky Sports. Louise had her own dog grooming business, which she conducted in a separate structure on her parents' property. It was like an outbuilding. Customers would reach her by using a gate on the side of the house. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On June 26, 2024, Louise Hunt broke up with Kyle Clifford. She had been disturbed by Kyle's cold and callous behavior and believed that he was cheating on her. Some of her family members had also pressured Louise to end the romance. Kyle was polite about the relationship termination. He did not give off any indication that he was going to be violent or do anything criminal. In reality, he was extremely dissatisfied with Louise and her family members. Over the next week or so, Kyle made several purchases consistent with preparing to commit homicide. For example, rope, duct tape, a 10-inch butcher knife, 2 gas cans, a crossbow, 6 bolts, and a cocking device. He also ordered a Glock air pistol, but it was never delivered. On July 9, 2024, at 1:07 p.m., Kyle left his home in Enfield and drove to the town of Bushey. He parked his vehicle on the street not far from the Hunt family house where Louise lived. Kyle exited his vehicle, walked to the house, examined the driveway, then returned to his vehicle. Presumably, he wanted to see which cars were in the driveway. He was trying to figure out who was home. At 1:48 p.m., Kyle searched the internet for horse racing today. He did this to find out if Louise's father, John Hunt, was home. Again, he was a racing commentator. After making the search, Kyle moved his vehicle closer to the Hunt family house. Kyle exited his vehicle and walked toward the house. The butcher knife was concealed in a backpack. At 2:32 p.m., Kyle rang the doorbell. Louise's 61-year-old mother, Carol Hunt, answered the door. Kyle told her that the purpose of his visit was to return a bag of clothing which belonged to Louise. He also had a thank you card for Carol and John. They spoke for 7 minutes before Carol let him in at 2:39 p.m. Within 1 minute, Kyle produced the butcher knife and stabbed Carol to death. A doorbell camera captured the homicide and various sounds from the house throughout the day. While all this was happening, Louise was in the building on the property she used for her dog grooming business. At 3:04 p.m., Kyle returned to his vehicle. He retrieved his crossbow, put it under a blanket, and walked back to the house. At 4:12 p.m., Louise entered the house. Not long after this, several sounds were captured by the doorbell camera, including screaming, a man shouting, and banging. This continued until 4:26 p.m. Using the duct tape, Kyle restrained Louise and conducted an assault of a sexual nature. At 5:31 p.m., Kyle went out to the building where Louise worked and retrieved her cell phone. He used it to communicate with John, trying to find out when he was coming home. Kyle went on the internet and searched if unplugging a smoke detector would completely disable it. Presumably, he planned on setting the house on fire. At 6:49 p.m., as 28-year-old Hannah Hunt was walking up to the family house, she called Carol's phone. 1 minute later, Kyle used his crossbow and shot a bolt into the back of 25-year-old Louise Hunt, killing her. A few seconds later, Hannah entered the house and called out to Carol, trying to find out why Carol had not answered her cell phone. Hannah then walked upstairs. Right after this, she spotted Kyle and started yelling at him. Kyle attempted to calm Hannah down, but she was screaming and crying. At 6:52 p.m., Hannah sent a message to her boyfriend telling him to call the police and saying that Kyle was trying to tie her up. 2 minutes later, at 6:54 p.m., Kyle shot Hannah Hunt with his crossbow. He placed the weapon under a blanket and left Hannah in the family house. At this point, Hannah called emergency services. They arrived at 7:10 p.m. and found Hannah alive, but she died right after this. The police knew that Kyle Clifford was the killer, and they started looking for him immediately. He spent the night at the Lavender Hill Cemetery in Enfield. The police found him at 6 p.m., now on July 10, 2024, not far from his residence. When he saw the police approaching, he turned the crossbow on himself and fired a bolt into his chest. Kyle survived, but he was paralyzed from the chest down. On July 11, 2024, Kyle Clifford was arrested and charged with 3 counts of murder, 2 counts of possessing an offensive weapon, 1 for the knife and 1 for the crossbow, and 1 count of false imprisonment. Later, he was also charged in connection with conducting an assault of a sexual nature against Louise. On January 22, 2025, Kyle pleaded guilty to all the charges against him except the offense involving sex. His attorneys argued that he had consensual sex with Louise a few weeks before the murder, which explains the evidence of sexual contact. The Crown decided to try Kyle for that one charge, even though he had already pleaded guilty to the other charges and was facing life in prison. On March 6, Kyle was found guilty after a 4-day trial. On March 11, 2025, Kyle was sentenced to life in prison with a whole life order, meaning he will never be released. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few areas that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1. When Kyle Clifford was young, he was described as a wannabe gangster. He had a juvenile record for assault without injury, theft, and possession of cannabis. People found Kyle to be lazy, self-centered, and disturbing. He would justify the use of violence to solve problems and enjoyed watching videos of animals being harmed. Kyle's service in the military was undistinguished at best. He was there for just over 2 years, but spent 286 days of that time at home claiming to be sick. Technically, he never saw active service. Acquaintances described Kyle as a substandard soldier who repeatedly failed to follow instructions. His commanding officer said that Kyle's character was wholly unsuited to military employment, and he has no care nor concern beyond himself. Item number 2. Kyle has an older brother named Bradley Clifford, who is also in prison. Bradley had some type of disagreement with 2 teenagers on a moped. One of them allegedly smashed a bottle on his Ford Mustang. Bradley chased them down for 20 minutes on the streets of Enfield and rammed their moped with his vehicle. One of the teenagers was killed, and the other one was injured. Bradley exited his vehicle and repeatedly punched the teenager, who died as he was on the ground. Item number 3. The police found a note written by Kyle, which was labeled, "To myself." He wrote, quote, "I am so sorry I didn't give myself a chance to move on past this, to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I know you want to find peace, and it's a battle in your head right now. What's different this time? I don't want to live my life without her. I don't want to experience new things. Nothing I can think of can make me happy. I know I could have gone to therapy, found faith, and become a new, better person, but I just simply don't want to. I am so sorry I didn't wait to move on and find my future wife, have the children I always wanted." Unquote. The police asked Kyle what he meant by this note, but he replied, no comment. It's curious that Kyle would be so upset about losing one particular lover when he had many romantic partners. He was dating at least 2 women when Louise broke up with him. It wasn't like he was going to be alone. This dynamic is not unheard of among men who murder women based on romantic rejection. Some men want everything. They cannot stand being rejected at all. They are fine rejecting women, but they don't want the women to reject them. It doesn't matter how many lovers they have. They demand that all of them be available at all times. Losing even one is totally unacceptable. Item number 4, what do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Kyle Clifford was self-centered, impulsive, irresponsible, manipulative, deceptive, demanding, controlling, cold, callous, vulnerable, vindictive, lazy, sadistic, jealous, possessed superficial charm, falsely believed he was special, had a sense of entitlement, and was exceedingly creepy. Kyle was able to impress Louise during the early part of their romance, but then he became jealous and controlling. He tried to prevent her from wearing makeup, told her to dress conservatively, prevented her from communicating with male acquaintances, and would not let her go anywhere without him. Louise tolerated the restrictions that Kyle imposed on her for a while, but eventually he became too disturbing, and pressure from her family members was too intense. Everyone was ready for Kyle to be gone. Kyle decided he was going to make Louise and her family pay for this rejection. His plan was to commit the murders before bringing an end to his own life, but somehow he survived. If Kyle had to kill 100 people to get his revenge, that would have been acceptable to him. There was no limit to the destructive power of his narcissism. He thought the world owed him everything. When he couldn't get his way, he was determined to destroy it. Now moving to my last item, number 5. The authorities indicated that prior to the murders, Kyle Clifford searched for videos featuring Andrew Tate. Some people believe that Andrew's work may have contributed to Kyle's decision to kill the women. Andrew Tate is a notorious far-right conspiracy theorist and a self-described misogynist who is sometimes called the king of toxic masculinity. At the time I'm making this video, he is being investigated in Romania, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Some of these investigations are criminal, others are civil. Andrew is highly effective at attracting male followers who blame women for their problems. For example, some of his followers are part of the incel community, that is, men who are unable to find women who will have sex with them. Followers of Andrew Tate could be motivated by any number of his myriad and offensive messages. With his vast collection of nonsensical beliefs, he has something disturbing to satisfy even the most selective, antisocial, and insecure men. Some men latch onto his endorsement of conspiracy theories, whereas others connect with his negative view of women. Andrew believes that women are terrible and harmful to men. Certain followers are not focused on the big picture at all. Rather, they embrace Andrew Tate because they have a specific problem with one woman, like a woman who rejected them romantically at some point during their lives. These men don't recognize that a woman has the right to reject them. From their perspective, the rejection is an act of violence. Andrew has become an anti-hero who disturbed men live through vicariously. He is a physical manifestation of their dark and selfish fantasies. Essentially, Andrew Tate is telling these men that their negative desires are not only acceptable, but necessary to save the world from liberal ideology. Again, Andrew is a far-right conspiracy theorist. He is not a fan of liberals. Andrew takes all the worst characteristics and maladaptive beliefs of his followers and converts them into something positive. At least, this is what the men believe. Troubled men look to Andrew when they want to rationalize their antisocial behavior. Given that Kyle Clifford had a negative view of women in general and was angry with a specific former lover, it stands to reason that he would have been interested in Andrew Tate. Andrew's beliefs were pressing every button, so to speak. His work was connecting with Kyle on multiple levels. I don't think Andrew's message contributed to Kyle becoming a killer. Rather, Kyle was already determined to kill, and he was looking for justification and validation. He wanted to hear what he believed to be a friendly and supportive voice as he prepared for the murders. Those are my thoughts on the case of Kyle Clifford. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.